Good morning. So starting a little early today because I have my family visiting and we got stuff we gotta do today. But I didn't want to miss out on today's topic. So I wanted to talk a little bit about being a woman and why we're always so embarrassed about it. Because I've noticed, and I'm not saying I'm perfect, I'm saying I am victim to it too, being embarrassed to be a woman. And it doesn't make any sense sometimes why we are so embarrassed to be women. And sometimes it's things that happen, like if you're a guy, sorry, it's gonna get uncomfortable in here, but like your period and being cramping or feeling uncomfortable with the lumps in your body and all these kinds of things that are out of our control a lot of the times, and things that a lot of the guys that I know aren't embarrassed about. It's just us. So this happens a lot, and I've noticed it a lot more with my husband now than I did before, mostly because he points it out a lot. So I remember one of the first times we were staying together, I started my period. I didn't quite have the prep that I had now, and I leaked out of the back. So if you're new to this, either you've never had a heavy period and it's never been a problem, or you're a guy watching and you're like, oh, what do you mean you leaked? So when you're sleeping, if you still happen to be bleeding when you're sleeping, you can go up your butt crack and out of your underwear or you can go through your underwear, different things like that. You leak, it happens. So I did. It went through my underwear, my bottoms, and onto the sheets. If this has ever happened to you, it's uncomfortable and a little embarrassing. If it's ever happened to you in someone else's bed, that's even more uncomfortable, even more embarrassing. And you've got two options. You can either figure out how to fix it, or you can figure out how fast you can get out of there, because you don't want to be anywhere near this. So I remember this day because it was really embarrassing and really frustrating. And I was like, oh my gosh, I can't believe this happened. I'm usually so good about this. Hadn't done this in a long time. So I just decided to make it as if it didn't happen. So I ripped all of the sheets off the bed and I threw them all in the washer, scrubbed it up, make sure it was clean, nothing happened, washed it, dried it, put them all back on the bed, and it looked like nothing had ever happened. Cleaned my clothes, everything, all the evidence was gone. A few months later, I remember I was talking to my husband about it. Then I think we were fiancé, I don't remember anymore, but talking about it, and I think I brought it up that it had happened before because he'd been trying to get me to be less embarrassed. I was like, it happens. I remember I did this before. And he was like, what? What? And I told him, I was like, well, I was embarrassed. I didn't want you to find out. And he was like, what? That you bleed? Surprise, surprise. So he approaches a lot of this stuff from a very analytical and scientific point of view, partly because he is a chemist. But he was always just like looking at it like, I don't get why you're embarrassed. It's not like you peed the bed kind of thing that you have control over. Like, you don't control it. It's not like, I think I'll bleed today. It's just, it happens. And it's part of being healthy. It's part of being a young woman. That's kind of also how, the whole cycle thing works, so that you can eventually have children. But it's something that we're really embarrassed about. We don't talk about it. We don't talk about our struggles. If we're PMSing, it is the butt of every joke, especially in like sitcoms and things like that. If a woman is overly emotional, oh, she must be on her period. Why? Also, why is being overly emotional a problem? But it was just like, it's not something you can control. I can understand it came out, and it's not that I wasn't wearing anything. I was. It just sometimes will not even go on it and just completely miss it. And gravity, I guess? I don't know. I can't really explain it either. It baffles me why it happens. But things like this happen, and it's part of being a woman. But we are just so trained to be embarrassed and to make it seem like we don't have a period, that we don't exude fluids and we're perfect. It's the same thing with when you're a woman that's on a date, you do not fart. Granted, guys don't either, because my husband mentioned that he was holding in a fart our entire first date, which was hilarious to me. But we are trained to be perfect. We don't have bodily fluids. When we're sick, we kind of suck it up and we kind of keep running and doing all of this stuff and never stop. And we try to hide when we're Like if our nose are red because it's running, we put the makeup on it and everything, and we try to hide our imperfections. And I'm guilty of it too. I do it all the time. If I've got a pimple going, if, like the other day when I had the bruise across my nose, it wasn't a bruise, it was a bad reaction to a nose strip, but I felt the need to cover it up. I had to hide my imperfections, and it's something that we all do, and it's baffling how embarrassed we are to be women, like to be human sometimes, just because something happened that wasn't according to plan, or just life happens and things go wrong. And it happens all the time. It's gotten to the point where we try to hide the rolls in our skin. So for the longest time, I've gained a little bit of weight since then, but when I was younger, I was described as skin and bones. Like I had no fat on me, just because I was just growing like a taffy, just doing this number where I was just getting skinnier. And I still didn't feel thin enough because I still had these rolls, and when I sat slouched, like I had little belly rolls and things like that, that everybody has them, and it's the excess skin that allows us to stretch. So if you were perfectly form-fitted to be standing up straight, you couldn't stretch backwards, you couldn't stretch forwards, because there wouldn't be enough skin to stretch. But we're embarrassed by this because we're supposed to have smooth, perfect bodies. That's just not the reality. And another thing is when we try on underwear that we see in like the Victoria's Secrets, where they have absolutely no lumps, it's all smooth and curvy, that's photoshopped. You can go in there and try underwear, and you're going to have a little indentation where it hugs a little tight, because when you hold on tight, like it could be smooth, if you tighten it, you're going to get a little lump there because it's holding on to you. It's not that you're fat, it's not that you're overweight, it's not that you have anything to be embarrassed about. It's just that that's how your clothing is holding on to you. But we're embarrassed by it because we assume we're supposed to look like these photoshopped models. And I understand that a lot of men go through the same thing when it comes to looking at all of the like underwear ads and things like that for men, where they use athletes or models who put in a lot of work to have all of the muscles, and there's even those photoshops that where they got their bulge photoshopped bigger. But it doesn't seem to sink in quite as deeply as it does for women sometimes, because I still see all of these guys who are confident. Lately, the Dadbod has been so cool, which if you haven't heard of it, it's just a guy who's a little bit heftier, a little pudgier, and it's supposed to be like a cool thing. He's got the dad bod, and everybody thinks it's really attractive and, you know, sexy, which, nothing against it. If you guys look great exactly the way you are, but we aren't allowing women the same ease. It's not like we can have a mom body, which if you've ever had a kid and given birth, your body doesn't snap back to what it used to look like. The skin has to relax and come back to the way it was, and even then it doesn't come back exactly, and there's a lot of work that goes into it. You have to work out if you want to look at the same, you have to do the creams and everything so you don't get stretch marks, and there's a lot of work to try to get your body to go back. But we seem to have this expectation that we are expected to go back, otherwise it's embarrassing. You have stretch marks, that's embarrassing. You have periods, it's embarrassing. Your makeup's wrong, or you have a pimple, or your body isn't perfect. And we keep seeing these things as embarrassments to ourselves because we're not perfect. And that's ridiculous, because we are all human and our bodies aren't perfect. They have all of these imperfections that make us unique. And even then, the rolls on your body doesn't mean that you're fat or imperfect. It just means that you have skin and flesh and you are shaped a certain way. All of me and my sisters look completely different in our body shapes, but that doesn't make any one of us more beautiful than the other. It just makes us different. But we are all somehow expected to fit a certain type of body. And what I've also noticed is that I've always been told, like, oh, well, it's because you're really tall and thin. Like, you must not care, or you must be able to wear whatever you want. No. I feel like it would be so much more liberating to be a plus-size person, because it's being praised and exalted right now. And you can go and you don't even worry about your rolls because it's part of your aesthetic and everybody loves it. And if you ask them, they probably say the same thing about somebody who's my shape. And it's been so ingrained in us that somebody else looks better than we do, and our bodies are this imperfect thing that we just have to live with, or we have to work out and lose weight, or we have to wear shapewear so that our body looks the way it's supposed to. And that's just not true. Our bodies look the way they do to fit a certain job or to do certain things. If you are a swimmer, odds are you have broader shoulders because you have the muscle here and you can do what you do. You can swim better. If you are like an athlete, you have a specific build. If you're a runner, you're typically tall and thin because it allows you to run faster. That doesn't make you more or less beautiful than anyone else. It just makes you different. And a lot of the time we tend to see all of these differences as imperfections in ourselves, and it's not true. Why are we embarrassed to be ourselves? And we really shouldn't be. We should be proud. It's really funny that my husband, looking at his body shape, he's like, yeah, I've had love handles since I was 12, and that's it, moves on. He's just so used to it, and I envy that a little bit, because it's like, I wish I could just accept how my body looks. But since we started dating, we go out to eat. We used to go out to eat a lot because we were going on dates, and my favorite food is pasta. And if you know, pasta's not necessarily good for maintaining a figure. So we would go out to eat a lot, and we would go eat a lot of different Italian places to eat different pastas, because that's one of my favorite foods. And so naturally, I gained weight. I gained a lot of weight because I had never weighed more than about 115 for the longest time. And then suddenly I'm gaining like 20 pounds, and I'm like, oh shoot, I've gained all of this weight. I had to buy new clothing. Weight disperses itself differently in everybody's body, so I'm trying to figure out what to do with all of this new weight and where it's at and how I feel. And I felt very uncomfortable for a while, because I suddenly didn't feel the same that I did when I was thinner, which a lot of people have looked at me and said, you look pretty much the same as when you started dating him. Like, nobody can notice a difference. A few people have noticed a little bit where my weight has gone, but other than that, most people don't even notice. They don't care until I say something. They're like, oh, I mean, I guess you look a little bigger, but I didn't really notice. But to me, it was shattering my image. I was like, oh my goodness, I look so different. All of this thing has changed, all of this, and I'm not the same anymore. And on the flip side, my husband also gained weight because we were eating at the same places, but I didn't notice his weight gain either. And I just kind of rolled with it, and I don't see him any less attractive, and it seemed so common, and he wasn't happy about it either, but he just kind of rolled with it. He was like, all right, well, this is what happens, and we move on. It just means I'm getting fed good food at home. And it's something that I feel has to do a lot with society, how we raise people, and we need to start changing this narrative, because we need women who are happy with the way they look and who wear it, and so we can wear it honestly. Because if we're modeling and we have a little bit of skin that kind of comes up into little lumps around like underwear lines, because like I said earlier, it's just, that's where it's gripping on, so it's going to grip and squeeze your skin a little bit, and we're embarrassed and it gets photoshopped out. Well, I say bring it back. Let us know what it looks like. Let us be together in this honesty where we can say, okay, so it's not that I'm overweight, it's just the way it fits. I remember when I was in Florida, I went with a couple of my roommates to the Victoria's Secret at the mall, and I was looking at some underwear, and I said, oh, these are really cute. And she said, just be careful. If you have any like fat, excess skin, anything, it's gonna make little rolls on your bottom. That's what it does. That's the way it fits. But I remember looking at the model that was wearing it, and there was nothing. So when I tried it on, remember, this was before I met my husband, so I was still fairly thin. I also was on a tight budget because I was in college, so I was like not eating healthy things sometimes. And I tried them on, and I just felt so uncomfortable because it was squeezing. And looking back, I was afraid to wear bikinis because I felt like I still had lumps and rolls, and I remember trying to like lean back when I sat down on the beach because that way my stomach wouldn't make the little rolls when you sit down, and I was doing everything I could to try to make sure that my body was smooth and perfect, and for what? I was probably the thinnest I'm ever going to be, and I still wasn't happy with my body because there's these unrealistic expectations of what it should look like. And what I've always found really funny is if we look back in history, roles were something to be attained. There's all of these paintings of women and all of these roles in their body because what used to be the standard of beauty was heftier women because it meant that you ate well because you came from a prominent family that had enough money to feed you enough to be big enough. That was a thing because just the way society and class and everything fell into place, if you had like a good full body, it meant that you were eating well at home, which meant that you had enough money and you came from a prominent family. And so that was the standard of beauty. Bigger women were the beauty of their time. As time passed, the standard of beauty changed because suddenly it was, you have to work out, you have to have a tight body, you have to look like this, you have to, because that was harder to obtain, because suddenly food was a lot easier to access, and more specifically unhealthy food, which helped, with the weight gain thing. So suddenly this other body, which was harder to obtain, became the beauty standard because it was harder to obtain. And with Photoshop and all of these things that have come out, the standard has changed like tremendously because we can manipulate with the computer what our bodies look like to create a new standard of beauty that is quite literally unattainable because this isn't even what that person's body looks like. It's happened before where models will look at their pictures that have been photoshopped and they don't even recognize themselves because they look so different because of all of the changes that they've made. They can make your neck longer, they can make your legs longer, they can change it and smooth out all of your curves and everything to be the perfect body, when in reality nobody's body looks like that. When you wear any clothing, there's going to be some lumps, some weird body parts that you're like, I don't understand why that does that, but we're still expected to be embarrassed by it because we don't look the way a computer generated a person to look. And it's crazy sometimes how we've begun to hold ourselves to these standards without even questioning where it comes from. Fortunately, there's been more movements lately that kind of unveil what these models looked like beforehand. There's these videos that show what they go through when they get photoshopped, what the pictures look like before and after in the process, and what they're changing and what they're doing. And it's kind of opening our eyes to see that none of this is very real. None of this is something that we should be worried about or trying to look like, because it's not honest. And it makes, once we start to accept this and start to praise all body types for whatever they look like, we can start to slowly feel more comfortable. And another important thing that I've been reading is the way that we raise kids is also very important. So there's been posts and stories and everything about mothers who try and fight very, very hard not to talk negatively about their own bodies or to describe their children in any way that is indicative of what their body looks like, because that will change how they think. So if you're constantly telling yourself, oh, well, my body doesn't look right like this, or, oh, well, you're gaining weight, or this doesn't look right, or this doesn't look right. If you're trying on a swimsuit in front of your child and you're saying that, I've got all of these lumps and rolls, and saying it like it's a bad thing, they're going to assume and learn from you that that is a bad thing, and they're going to be ashamed if that's the way their bodies look like, because that's what we've started to teach them. So instead of saying that, you have to start praising yourself more and training your mind and training your children's minds to praise all body types. Be like, you know what, I'm healthy, I'm happy, I can still, if your standard is to run a marathon and you can still run a marathon, it doesn't matter what your body looks like. You're healthy enough to do that, and you're taking care of yourself, and that should be what we're trying to achieve instead of trying to look a certain way. Instead of being so focused on, oh, I need my body to look picture perfect. It's like, no, I need my body to be healthy and be able to take care of me and do all of the things I need to do. And if we start changing our language that way, the kids that watch us, who learn from us, are going to learn that. And slowly but surely, we might actually stop being quite so embarrassed. So maybe one morning when you wake up and you stain the sheets, or you're trying on dresses when you go out shopping, it's not a big deal anymore. It's just, life happens. Let's take care of it. Let's fix it. Let's enjoy the shopping. Let's wash the sheets. Let's do whatever we have to do. So, thanks for listening.